found Nigel to be a very reserved person. It's certainly not the Nigel you see today.
I was terrified when I went to Monroe.
I have a lot of respect and regard for him. I will actually miss him.
Brilliant. Definitely one of the brightest minds that Jamaica has ever produced.
Not many people would take on this challenge.
So he made the job of Epoch quite easy.
I was president of the Jamaica Chess Federation when I met Dr. Clarke at this tournament. Immediately he impressed me as someone with tremendous possibility.
I found him to be very probing, very thorough, sort of data-driven, respected analysis.
I have a very strong artistic sense to me, to who I am as a person.
Jamaica is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. We're known globally for our white sand beaches, mouth-watering cuisine, reggae and dancehall music, and of course, our Olympic gold medal athletes. Unfortunately, that's not all. Jamaica has been saddled with a reputation of chronic economic instability, a problem that has plagued us for most of our independent existence. Insurmountable debt, inadequate foreign exchange reserves, high inflation, and high double-digit unemployment had become our international calling card by the early 2000s. That is, until recently. Nigel Clarke is on record for calling this turnaround the collective achievement of the Jamaican people. That is his humility at work. What is clear is that Nigel Clarke's stewardship as Ambassador of Economic Affairs and Minister of Finance has been a decisive factor in Jamaica achieving what some considered the impossible dream of economic stability. Jamaica has even been recognized as an economic model for the developing world by the IMF and other international financial institutions. Today, Jamaica's macroeconomic fundamentals are the best they've been in 45 years. Not even a pandemic could derail our progress with Nigel Clarke at the helm. What some might consider the crowning achievement of a career, a decisive role in transforming the economy of a country, for Nigel Clarke, it's become the next step in the unprecedented journey of a brilliant mind. Nigel Clarke is making history. He is the first Caribbean or Central American citizen to become Deputy Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, a post he will begin at the end of October 2024. But who is Nigel Clarke? What drives him? What special skills allow him to soar higher and accomplish more than his contemporaries? To understand how a man becomes a pioneer, we have to return to the beginning. This is the story of Jamaica's financial MVP, Nigel Clarke. Nigel Andrew Lincoln Clarke was born on Wednesday, October 20, 1971, at the Nuttall Hospital in St. Andrew, Jamaica. His father, Neville Clarke, was a lawyer who later became a judge in Jamaica's Court of Appeal. His mother, Mary Clarke, was Jamaica's first children's advocate and an educator who served as a social planner at the Planning Institute of Jamaica.
Through both of my parents, but in particular my father, the value of hard work and of diligence and perseverance and persistence. My mom, funny enough, it was my mom who introduced me to finance. It was through my mother that I got involved in invested in stocks. It was through my mom. And she would have certainly taught me how to manage funds, manage money.
Public service in the Clarke house was a verb, and the Clarke children were eager to take action.
My father was a fervent believer in the promise and potential of Jamaica, which he passed on to me. I grew up with a profound sense of confidence in Jamaica, in its capacity, and in its future. And my dad was instrumental in that.
Young Nigel attended St. Richard's Primary at 123 Red Hills Road until he was 10 years old, when his father was appointed resident magistrate of Westmoreland, forcing the family to move out west.
I grew up in Kingston, and the plan was for me to go to high school in Kingston, right? And my father got transferred to Westmoreland, and so they had to make a quick decision as to where I would be sent. It was a decision that was made after the exam, but before the results came out, so they were able to actually get it into the Ministry of Education. And I just heard them speaking about it, my parents that is, by the way. And around our dining table, boarding school was always treated as punishment. If you don't eat your food, I'm going to send you to boarding school. So when I overheard them talking about sending me to boarding school, I ran outside and I cried.
Nigel was enrolled at Monroe College, a boarding school in St. Elizabeth.
Monroe had a profound influence on my life, for sure. It was very challenging at first. I didn't know anybody at the school. I was boarding. In those days, there were no cell phones. You would have absolutely no communication with your parents or your home for 4 weeks at a time. And but in the end, it turned out to be an extremely valuable experience. It formed lifelong friendships at Monroe. These are boys who I'd have met at 10 years old. I went to Monroe at 10, and who have remained good friends with throughout my life.
My first encounter with Nigel, wow, we're talking 1982. I was 11, I think Nigel was 10. I found Nigel to be a very reserved person. It's certainly not the Nigel you see today. He was very much, as I said, a lot quieter and more low-key. His nickname is Judge. And even to a day like today, he'll call me today and I'll answer the phone. Hey, Judge, what's up? The reason why we call him Judge is because his father, Nigel Clarke, was a high court judge in Jamaica.
It was during the Monroe years that Nigel discovered he possessed a rare aptitude for mathematics.
By a teenager, he was already at the top of the class. So by third or fourth form, Nigel was ranked #1. By the end of third form, going into fourth form, I realized that Nigel's performance level was at a different level, really. One of my fondest memories was Nigel was actually not Nigel Judge, he was actually our banker. So we got money. So when you're dropped at school for the term, your parents give you some cash. So we used to give Nigel our money to hold on to, and he had a ledger, and he was able to track, all right, Chris has $20, he's taking out $5, and he'd question every time we come for a withdrawal and asked us. But it forced us to be disciplined. We trusted him. We knew that it would be well taken care of, and he made sure that come at the end of the term, we still had a little bit left over, so we weren't starving. Because the food back then wasn't the best, so we always had to have some top money.
When I was in sixth form, I had a math teacher who saw something in me and pulled me out and taught me one-on-one, and taught me things beyond the immediate syllabus on a one-on-one basis. No pay, no request by my parents, no request by me, just her own volition. She saw it useful to make that investment in me. By the time I was leaving Monroe to go to UWI, I had settled on that I wanted to study mathematics. So I wanted to pursue a career in mathematics. The only thing I knew at the time was to be an actuary. So that's what I said I wanted to do.
When his A-level results came in, Nigel was excited to learn that he'd received the Jamaica Independence Open Scholarship to attend the University of the West Indies in Kingston.
Nigel has always been one of our model students. I remember him as being very quiet, always sitting at the front, asking probing questions, always engaging in conversation with me as a lecturer. And I admired that a lot because at the time when I taught Nigel, we both were relatively young. And I could actually see the admiration from Nigel. So it was reciprocated by me as well when I realized that this young man had such a keen interest in learning the material. And he was absolutely bright and excelled in everything that he did in terms of the courses that was delivered to him.
I was in my living room on the sofa, and my dad came home and posed it to me as a hypothetical question. Suppose you won the job, what would you? That's how I heard.
Nigel approached university with his usual all-in attitude and earned an undergraduate degree in mathematics and computer studies with first-class honors, copying the award for the top performer with the highest marks in the Faculty of Natural Sciences across the UWI's 3 campuses in Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados. And then, opportunity came knocking from across the globe. Up next, Nigel heads to Oxford and gains more than an education. In 1993, Meatloaf's I'd Do Anything for Love topped the music charts. The X-Files became must-see TV, and Nigel Clarke crossed an ocean to pursue his destiny. He'd won a Commonwealth scholarship to attend Oxford University.
For me, it was just fantastic. When I was at a graduate college, that's a college with only graduate students, people doing masters and PhDs, and to just be around so many people who were doing PhDs, it was just normalizing experience.
After completing his Masters of Science in Applied Statistics in 1994, Nigel decided to pursue a Doctor of Philosophy in Numerical Analysis. Bolstered by his record of academic success, he was awarded a Rhodes Scholarship to remain at Oxford until 1997.
And I said, my Lord, I had the privilege of reading in a particular newspaper that one Nigel from the clan Clarke had been awarded the Rhodes Scholarship, and the judge started smiling now, you know. I have treasured that memory of that exchange with Justice Clarke nearly 30 years ago.
But it wasn't all work and no play.
When I went to Oxford, I was on a Commonwealth scholarship. I got a stipend on a monthly basis. One of the first things I did with a stipend was to buy a camcorder. Right? This is 1993 that I went there, September, going into 94. So I bought a camcorder, and I would just carry it everywhere. I made a couple of sort of amateur videos and then amateur films. It was a story that, it was a film that gave you insights into Lineker College. And you saw Lineker College through the eyes of 2 students, one who is new and very awkward and looks like a misfit, and the other who is older, has been around and is cool and is his mentor.
I went to this party last night. You'd have loved it. You'd have really loved it. There was this guy, and he kind of went, Charlie, are you okay?
30 years later, that film was shown at the reunion. There are few things that you do that 30 years later, they're still relevant or of value. And an amateur film that I made at Oxford in the mid-1990s was seen as useful to show at a reunion 30 years later.
Nigel proved as passionate about the arts as he was about numbers. Passion that bore fruit for his fellow Jamaicans once he returned home. A decade after returning to Jamaica, Nigel co-founded the National Youth Orchestra of Jamaica, a non-profit, non-governmental organization that uses music training as a tool of social empowerment.
He had a concept about having an organization that's similar to the El Sistema that they have in Venezuela, where they get sponsorship to have lessons, music lessons for students who are underprivileged or in settings where they don't have enough money to get lessons. And they do this using classical music because he loves classical music. He loves a wide range of music, but certainly he loves classical music.
Under Nigel's leadership as chair of NYOJ, thousands of Jamaican children were introduced to the transformative power of classical music training at the organization's 6 centers.
Teaching music in a structured format is an exercise that inculcates the values of discipline, hard work, teamwork, resilience, personal excellence towards a team goal as far as an orchestra is concerned. And it's something that many, many Jamaicans don't have access to. NYOJ is one of the things I am most proud of that I've done in my life, or have been most meaningful to me. Spreading that joy and that love of music, but also at a more fundamental level, spreading the message that all knowledge is valuable.
Nigel doubled as an impresario, producing classical concerts at Carnegie Hall in New York and the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., featuring internationally acclaimed Jamaican pianist Orrit Roden, a fellow St. Richard's Primary alum.
I didn't know anything about producing a concert, but I produced Orrit Roden at Carnegie Hall in 2009. And we had a full house. We had a triple standing ovation, and it was mesmerizing.
In 2012, Jamaica witnessed a unique musical fusion when the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra graced the stage of the Holy Trinity Cathedral. The performance, featuring the NYOJ and other local musicians, captivated a capacity audience, showcasing a vibrant blend of international artistry and Jamaican talent.
Some of those kids are now big people. I run into them all the time, and I'm immensely proud of them and what they've achieved. Some have stayed in music. Some have even gone on to be musicians themselves. And there's one person in particular who has gone on to become a teacher himself.
Several people have benefited from Nigel's interaction and investment, in music. And Kamal Gordon comes to mind immediately.
My journey started with the National Youth Orchestra of Jamaica. And this program, this organization was established, by Dr. Nigel Clarke. He was very, very instrumental, in getting that program up and running. And my journey at Kingston College would have led me to joining and being a part of this whole program. And Uncle Nigel, as we call him, would pop in from time to time, and he would come and talk to us and motivate us, and from that time, even then, he was an inspiration for all of us.
Beyond his remarkable achievements in the arts, Nigel Clarke emerged as a formidable force in the world of chess in Jamaica. In addition to playing the game, he became a key member of the Jamaica Chess Federation Council and has been instrumental in elevating the game and inspiring a new generation of chess enthusiasts.
I first met Dr. Clarke approximately 10 years ago in a chess context. He had taken his son to play in a chess tournament, and I was very happy to have met him, having known of him before, particularly through his father, Justice Nigel Clarke of blessed memory.
I learned chess at Monroe from a friend of mine, but it wasn't a passion at that time. I really became passionate about chess when my children started to play chess. For me, chess is a masterful game to learn about many very important things in life. Thinking before you act, consequences of actions, strategy versus tactics, how to be civil but to compete. Chess is one of the most aggressive games, but you wouldn't know it from the demeanor of people playing chess.
Clarke was so passionate that he co-produced and hosted the inaugural Jamaica International Chess Festival in October 2017.
One of the big highlights was that we had human chess in Emancipation Park, So we have a big, giant chessboard that is marked out in Emancipation Park. We got costumes to look like chess pieces, and the kids would put on the costumes. So I am the king, or I am the queen, or I am the bishop, or I am the rook, or I'm a pawn, or I'm a knight. And the kids in their costumes are arranged on the chessboard. And then we pick two kids to say, all right, you are playing each other and you will direct the movement of the pieces, which are live human beings, live other kids. And this was in Emancipation Park. It was amazing.
One of Nigel's long-held ambitions is for Jamaica to produce a homegrown chess grandmaster within a decade. Over a period of 15 years, Nigel Clarke played an integral executive leadership role at Musson. Musson grew from operating only in Jamaica to operating in over 30 countries worldwide and with over $1 billion in revenues. Some of the titans of the Jamaican business world, like Oliver Clarke, Desmond Blades, Douglas Serrain, Danny Williams, Robert Levy, Pat Rousseau, and Michael Lee Chin, took note of Nigel's abilities and invited him to serve on boards when he was still in his 20s. By the time he was 29 years old, Nigel was already serving on the board of directors of some of the largest well-established blue-chip companies listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, including Red Stripe Limited, Jamaica's most famous beer brewery and bottling service, Jamaica Broilers Group, and later Seprod Limited, the latter two organizations responsible for almost everything on your dinner plate, to name a few. And National Commercial Bank, the predecessor of the NCB Financial Group, Jamaica's largest financial services holding company. At a time when most young people are just finding their feet in the working world, Nigel was already shouldering immense corporate responsibility, weighing consequential financial decisions, and bringing his sharp analytical mind and sound judgment to bear on difficult choices and decisions. Nigel's golden touch wasn't limited to the private sector. Like his parents before him, Nigel did not shy away from public service. Over different periods, he served as chairman of the National Housing Trust, the Port Authority of Jamaica, and the Heart Trust. What others would have termed a robust career fell short of Nigel's internal expectations. He became increasingly drawn to public service. Coming up next, Nigel Clarke makes the jump from the private sector to politics. Shortly after returning to Jamaica in the year 2000, Nigel Clarke fell in with a group of young professionals who liked to get together after a day at the office and reimagine a brighter future for Jamaica. These idyllic patriots all came from the private sector, except for one young member of parliament named Andrew Holness.
When I came back to Jamaica, I was deeply disappointed with the malaise that Jamaica was in at that time. Clearly, I followed what was happening from overseas, but being here, and this is back in 1999, we're still in the depth of the FinSAC era. The place is comatose, certainly as compared to today. And a group of young people shared that sentiment that we can be better than this, and just sense a deep disappointment with the economic. So here I'm talking about the economic environment. There are a lot of things that are good and a lot of good things that are happening for sure, but the economic environment was a source of disappointment. So a group of young people used to meet together and just discuss things and talk. And these young people were working in financial institutions or in consulting firms or had their own businesses. And there was one member of parliament in the group, and that was Andrew Holness. And that group that used to meet weekly eventually became G2K. Once it became clear that G2K was going to take on partisan positions, however, I sort of stepped back, because at that stage of my career, I was, focused on business. And if that was to be in my future, I thought I'd need a solid foundation.
The Jamaican economy, which was unstable for decades, was now on the precipice of bankruptcy. The new Minister of Finance for the People's National Party and government, Dr. Peter Phillips, along with his team, managed to tilt the country away from insolvency by making some tough decisions with the assistance and policy advice of the IMF and the support of Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller. Nigel's G2K associate, Andrew Holness, had become leader of the opposition by this time and invited Nigel to serve in the Upper House of Parliament in 2013 as an opposition senator.
I joined the Senate in 2013, but that was not my first invitation to join the Senate. I was very hesitant, and it's comfortable in the background. It was a critical time for Jamaica. Jamaica had just entered into an extended fund facility arrangement with the IMF in May of 2013. And there'll be a lot of legislation coming through the Parliament on financial and economic matters that the Senate would have to deal with. And so I knew that this was a very critical time in Jamaica's history. And being offered the opportunity to make a contribution at that stage was something that I jumped at. And though it was a major culture shock, stepping into that chamber for the first time, having had a private life until then, it was a period that I enjoyed immensely.
As a senator, Nigel led the opposition's contributions in debates on bills having to do with Jamaica's extended fund facility with the IMF. It was during this period that Nigel Clarke's political potential began to attract attention. By February 2016, Jamaica had just begun a course towards fiscal security when the People's National Party lost the election to the Jamaica Labour Party by a single seat.
I want to thank the people of Jamaica for investing in me and in the Jamaica Labour Party.
The change of government could have upended Jamaica's last hope for financial stability, as the incoming Prime Minister Holness was well aware. To ensure that this did not happen, he appointed Dr. Nigel Clarke to serve as Jamaica's Ambassador of Economic Affairs. For almost 9 years, from February 2016 to October 2024, Nigel Clarke has managed Jamaica's relationship with the IMF across successive and historically positive programs.
Strong leadership was definitely needed throughout the entire IMF agreement, because we've been derailed so many times in the past. And so demonstrating good leadership is trying to do just that. Striking that balance of trying to create social good for the people, create social programs for the people, but still being fiscally restrained, still adhering to the principles of the IMF and still making sure that we hit our targets and we pass those tests every single quarter when they come up, even despite all the demands that are coming at you as a politician, all the demands that are coming at you as a finance minister, all the demands from the people, from the trade unions, all the pressures coming from all over these places, but still maintaining the discipline, the fiscal discipline to hit those IMF targets and eventually get us out of that program, bring our debt down, which I think is the most significant achievement under this administration.
Jamaica and IMF have had a rocky relationship historically. You know, Jamaica has been through several IMF programs. Most of them were not completed, went off track. And so, you know, IMF was not exactly, like in many parts of the world, the IMF was not exactly popular because when the IMF program, when we go into a program engagement with the country, there are certain reforms that need to be done, adjustments are needed, etc. So that was the mindset with which IMF was looked at. But I think what turned out was a partnership that where they could see the benefits, they understood the benefits of taking on the reforms because they had lived through a history that had not served them well in terms of economic stability. Nothing happens automatically. It happens because of deliberate, conscious policymaking. And I think what Minister Clarke did was to exemplify that in being able to think through how to prepare the country to face many shocks.
Nigel also negotiated the early termination of the extended fund facility with the IMF, as well as Jamaica's entry into the $1.6 billion precautionary standby arrangement. Opportunity came once again for Nigel Clarke.
Now I have the winner of today's by-election for St. Andrew Northwestern, Dr. Nigel Clarke. First of all, Dr. Clarke, the results of the elections, they're out. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
Derek Smith, who had been the long-serving Member of Parliament for Northwest St. Andrew, decided to retire in early 2018, leaving a secure JLP seat open for contest. On March 5, 2018, Nigel Clarke won the by-election in Northwest St. Andrew and officially transitioned into a life of public service. His adventure, in fact, was just beginning.
That transition from sort of that role into sort of a representational political role was extremely daunting for me. As I went through the process of preparing myself for that, that was quite a challenging adjustment mentally. But once I made the decision to do it and did it, oh my God, one of the most rewarding experiences of my life.
Up next, Nigel Clarke is offered the opportunity of a lifetime. At just 47, Nigel Clarke received a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity from Prime Minister Andrew Holness. Impressed by Clarke's achievements as Ambassador of Economic Affairs, his accomplishments in the private sector, and his outstanding academic credentials, Holness believed he was the ideal candidate to guide Jamaica's economy into greener pastures as Minister of Finance and Public Service.
Here's our Bite of the Week.
There was a time where the career section of the Sunday newspaper, them used to have one section for the job them advertising, and that was section F or G or something like that.
And I have seen him evolve into the type of public speaker that becomes a popular politician.
Across all the public body. And then you go and talk to other unions. Now, in a restructuring, that's not the case. You have to go union, not only union by union, but public body by public body. Now, Madam Speaker, the 11 unions in the, this is 10, call them over here.
And it was something quite remarkable to watch because I didn't think he could do it. I didn't think he could become somebody who had mass appeal, but he was able to make that transition.
When you live in a glass house, do not throw stones.
Clarke's budget presentations in Parliament quickly developed a reputation as must-see TV. His penchant for theatre, coupled with his intrinsic passion for numbers, engaged audiences for hours on end. He used props to vividly and graphically communicate his thoughts and ideas.
We're in the communities and you hear people saying things and the confidence being expressed. You hear people speaking about his ability, Minister Clarke, to speak to Parliament and explain the budget and really demonstrate and break it down, and people felt a part of that process. Somebody said, well, I don't normally watch these things. I start watching now because I understand. Well, that's very significant.
Fun and jokes aside, Nigel Clarke was building a record of innovative and impactful policy achievements.
From a business perspective, what we know is that we would have a credible budget. What we know is that we would have macroeconomic stability. And what was lacking in Jamaica for many years, for decades, was stability. We would always have budgets where we have deficits, we have overruns, we have new taxes. There was always that something that would just jump out at you. You know, and therefore he was able to create that macroeconomic stability and no new taxes, which was a big ticket item for this administration.
He presented 6 consecutive budgets with no new taxes. Abolished discretionary taxes, and oftentimes focused on making small tax policy changes that produced positive results for Jamaica that did not cost much, but that delivered efficiency gains.
He has done a number of very notable achievements, not the least of which been very consistent and tough on fiscal sustainability. Getting that debt to GDP down to the 60% level. He's been very forthright in supporting policy changes that are fundamental to the future institutional stability of the country and the economy, such as the independent central bank, the establishment of a fiscal council. So outstanding in those respects.
Apart from policy reforms, Nigel Clarke was passionate about building institutions that would uphold his vision of prosperity for years to come.
EPOC is set up as a civil society body composed of the private sector, the financial sector, unions, agriculture, you know, coming together, small business coming together to really look at where the economy is going. But, you know, and then there may be some differences sometimes, and that we would debate, but at the end of the day, he did give us the freedom, but he gave us the guidance, because he would always be able to explain rationale for policy and the direction that we are seeing the macro fiscal going. So therefore, you know, let me tell you, the relationship with Nigel has been one that I've appreciated because I've learned a lot from him. I've learned a lot from that mind of his. He's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant man.
Fully aware of the role that education played in his own life, Nigel introduced innovative changes to Student Loan Bureau policies, as well as several scholarship programs, including the Marcus Garvey Public Sector Postgraduate Scholarship, the UTEC STEM Scholarships, and the MICO STEM Scholarships.
The Marcus Garvey Scholarship was something that he conceived of and was relentless in its implementation, and the inclusion of a upskilling program in the public sector transformation. His mantra being that if we are changing the public sector, if we're changing how we are working in the public sector, we can't leave public officers behind. We have to provide them with skills.
His policy leadership even led to the privatization of Wigton and Trans-Jamaica by way of the Jamaica Stock Exchange through initial public offerings, IPOs.
This was a transaction that was never done by a government company before. And so it was all brand new for us. First of all, how do we negotiate with these large international companies? So it was important that Dr. Clarke, as head of finance for the government, was part of these discussions and was able to guide these discussions to allow us to come to a successful conclusion. The Trans-Jamaica IPO was, or is, in fact, still is, the largest ever IPO ever done in Jamaica. And Dr. Clarke insisted that the majority of the shares of the IPO, so more than 50% of the shares of the IPO, were allocated to the public in general. So the general public, pension funds, public sector workers were guaranteed more than 50% of the shares of the IPO.
They were a big deal because I think these issuances had a great impact on the market. Jamaicans could feel that they could own a piece of Jamaica, and Jamaicans love that, you know.
And then, just when things were beginning to look up for Jamaica and Nigel Clarke, the entire world went sideways. Up next, Nigel Clarke leads Jamaica through the unprecedented. The COVID-19 pandemic may have been disruptive to the rest of the globe, but for a country like Jamaica that had teetered on the precipice of bankruptcy 7 years prior, it could have been catastrophic.
For me, the first instinct was to ensure that we did what we could to... This part is hard for me, seriously. It's hard for me. It was such a crazy experience. That was a rough one. Yeah. So let me say, one of the things that the Prime Minister did at the outset was to appoint a COVID economic recovery task force, which he asked me to chair, and it was a multi-stakeholder task force. We had basically, unions, academics, every single sector of business, NGOs, other interest groups represented, and we divided it up into various committees. And by June of 2020, we produced a report that was made public and tabled in Parliament and contained the strategy of the government to deal with this pandemic.
That plan, that COVID economic recovery, that task force document that was produced with deliverables such that we could see from executing on those deliverables the fastest turnaround in the Jamaican economy for us to get back to pre-COVID growth within like a little under 2 years.
His leadership, I think, as Minister of Finance and Public Service was very instrumental in helping to navigate the country through what would have been a very difficult time globally and certainly for Jamaica.
We may need to spend more as the crisis evolves, but we need to be prepared for what may be around the corner. We don't have infinite resources. We have managed on our own so far in this crisis because of our prudence and our predisposition to always be thinking ahead.
I think the resilience, the ability to have bounced back as quickly as we did, relative to many other countries and other jurisdictions, is testament to that type of leadership. If we're going to recover the economy, we have to think of the most vulnerable in society and make provisions. Yes, we have PATH program, the conditional cash transfer, but in other ways. He would have already been active in the care program, the COVID-19 allocation of resources for employees, and the BEST program, right? The business employees support. And innovative products that saw people getting support, cash transfer support, in a most difficult time. And I think that was very important, and he was leading that process.
The support for the Jamaica Labour Party and their handling of the COVID-19 pandemic was evident at the polls in September of 2020, where they won 49 out of 63 seats, a crushing victory. Up next, Nigel Clarke charts a new path for Jamaica. Like Jimmy Cliff's Many Rivers to Cross, Nigel Clarke remained focused on the extensive journey ahead of him. His first task, facing reality. In his lifetime, Nigel had experienced several financial crises, including FinSAC, the global financial crisis, and COVID-19. He realized that if Jamaica was going to build a solid financial foundation, there needed to be a plan to manage risk and make significant strides towards reform. Nigel pioneered a multi-layered disaster risk financing approach to provide funds in times of natural disaster.
We've been beset with vulnerability to climate events for forever. And the truth is, it's projected to get worse, right? In terms of the outlook is not very promising from a climate change standpoint. So we thought novel, and he's been on platforms internationally because people are asking, why this thing is almost best practice. How do you do that? How do you get Jamaica? So those things we are proud of, right? And I think he's been very instrumental in crafting that and sort of promulgating and showing that it works.
Before 2019, every time we had a heavy rainfall or we had a hurricane, we would have gone to a multilateral to borrow money to do repairs. Now we have our own insurances.
Through his efforts, Jamaica was able to have nearly 7 billion Jamaican dollars combined in all of its natural disaster funds by 2024. Jamaica was also the first small country in the world to sponsor a catastrophe bond. When it came to reform, Nigel did not shy away from the challenge. The elephant in the room had long boiled down to one issue: public sector compensation reform.
The old compensation system is not. 325 of these scales in the old compensation system, Madam Speaker. It is overly complex and utterly unmanageable. The new compensation system, Madam Speaker, replaces that with a core salary scale of 16 bands. Meeting the agreed eligibility criteria can access up to 20 working days of paternity leave. Maternity leave in the public sector from 40 days with pay to 60 working days with pay, Madam Speaker.
In the discussions with the unions, he indicated that the government was taking a big risk in dealing with the compensation issue even before we dealt with like productivity issues. But based on the discussions that we had been having with Dr. Clarke at the time, we were of the view that you had to deal with the compensation issues, because when you compared salaries paid in the private sector as against the public sector for comparable skills, the public sector just was not able to attract and retain talent in the sector, and we needed to have something done, especially because you're talking a lot about accountability, transparency, efficiency, all of those things. The pay is actually part of those considerations. And so we felt that you needed to address the compensation issue.
What Dr. Clarke did, he said that, I won't be able to fix it, all of it one time, but I will incrementally change it. And I'm happy to say that since we started those discussions until now, he's leaving. Over 10,000 persons have come off contract employment and more are in stream to come off contract employment. And for me, this creates what I call social protection.
So, public sector transformation is a journey that the government of Jamaica has been on for over 40 years. And we've had incremental success. This time around, I think Dr. Clarke was really interested in what had happened before in this area, in the public sector. And he was quick to recognize that one of the gaps was a focus on implementing things. The architect of the Transformation Implementation Unit is Dr. Clarke. I think he thought about and created the TIU as an entity focused on implementing transformational projects. And I think that was something that really turned the tide in our transformation journey.
But if Nigel thought one success would ensure another, he was mistaken. When it came to reforming the compensation of political representatives, the backlash was severe. No, it wasn't easy. Yes, at times he had to put up a fight. But Nigel Clarke's risk management plans, coupled with his sweeping reform, have brought long-lasting transformation to Jamaica. Up next, Nigel Clarke's leadership lands him on an international stage.
CVM TV and live Jamaica Premier League action on a Monday night. A match made in heaven. We call it Monday Match Night. Catch all the hard-pounding JPL Monday night action from now until the end of the season on CVM TV's Monday Match Night. Matchday Mondays at 7:45 p.m. with a rebroadcast Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Nothing else can quite match up. Monday Match Night, powered by Sunshine Snacks and ABC Electrical.
In the 2020 general election campaign, Nigel Clarke made a promise.
We now face the greatest crisis of our lifetimes. We have delivered, and we are best prepared to lead Jamaica to a strong recovery.
By 2024, he had more than delivered.
For IMF, for the World Bank, for the IDB, they needed Jamaica's story because, as you know the history, some of those institutions had been criticized to say, your policies don't really lift countries up and they don't, you're perpetuating poverty by that sort of prescriptive approach and not enough country ownership and country-led. When Jamaica emerged in terms of the types of successes, huge. And so he told that story. And to be fair, you would say it would have started from maybe 2009, 10, and a trajectory and of some continuity that continued. But under his tenure, his ability to articulate the issues, his leadership in even moving the needle significantly forward and pressing the pedal on a lot of those indicators, I think tremendous.
Call me biased, but independent central bank is the most important, in my opinion. It really sets the country on a course of monetary stability, independent of fiscal policy, administered by professionals. I think that's an outstanding achievement. It took boldness on his part to fight for it in the cabinet, to win it, to get it through Parliament, and has watched it, over the last 3 to 4 years. I hope he's happy with it, but I think the whole country is happy to know that we have an independent central bank.
Economic independence. Nigel believes, and I see it in his pronouncements, and that Jamaica can be economically independent and we can manifest the greatness that we all have as a people. But first you have to marshal the resources, and we have done so.
There is an economic transformation happening in Jamaica. And so I think what the IMF wants to tap into is that experience of being somebody on the ground who has had to implement these policies and now being able to replicate that success in other countries with a similar profile as Jamaica.
There is no doubt that Nigel is a special resource for Jamaica, that he has served with great dignity, poise, and confidence.
And our international credit rating is the highest it's ever been. In just 8 years and 8 months in public service, As Ambassador of Economic Affairs and Minister of Finance, building on the prior work of others, Nigel Clarke was able to achieve the previously elusive goal of economic stability while building considerable economic resilience. And Washington noticed. In 2022, Nigel became chairman of the Board of Governors of the Inter-American Development Bank, the $120 billion United States dollar development bank devoted to Latin America and the Caribbean. This step, big as it seemed, was only a taste of what was to come. On Monday, August 26, 2024, the managing director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, announced to the IMF's executive board her proposal to appoint Dr. Nigel Clarke to the position of deputy managing director effective October 31, 2024. That announcement sent shockwaves throughout Jamaica and the Caribbean.
Jamaica's finance minister, Dr. Nigel Clarke, has been nominated for the prestigious role of Deputy Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund.
A flood of congratulations has greeted Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clarke.
Very excited that Dr. Nigel Clarke is going to join our senior management team as a Deputy Managing Director.
Traditionally, the Managing Director is always a citizen from the European Union. And 3 out of the 4 deputy managing director positions are reserved for the other large shareholding countries. Only 1 deputy managing director position can be filled with a citizen of the remaining countries in the world, and that one will soon be occupied by a Jamaican.
He brings hands-on experience as Minister of Finance in transforming an economy from a weaker to a much stronger position. I know that he will be a great addition to our team with the experience he brings. And it doesn't harm that he has a fantastic education.
As a parting gift, 1 month before he demitted office, Nigel signed an MOU with the International Finance Corporation to develop $2 billion of public-private partnerships in roads, water, healthcare, broadband infrastructure, and renewable energy in Jamaica. Nigel Clarke is many things: a scholar, financier, social entrepreneur and NGO founder, musician, chess lover, orator, showman, Minister of Finance par excellence. But before he was any of those things, he was a Jamaican. He's worked for the better part of his life to strengthen Jamaica's position in the world.
I have no doubt that Dr. Clarke will acquit himself admirably in this new venture. He's going to make not just Jamaica proud, he's going to make the region proud.
They have actually got a prize. You know, I'm sorry that Jamaica loses Nigel at this point in time, because I do think that he had so much more to give us.
Judge, all I have to say is just don't change. You know, continue keeping in touch with all of us. Remember our dream to purchase the biggest fishing boat in Jamaica so that we can go fishing every weekend. So just make sure you back off enough time to come back home and hang out with us. I know you will. You're closer to your kids who are in university, which is fantastic. But we're very proud of you. I'm very proud of you. Your success, I feel, is my success.
So, what's next for Dr. Nigel Clarke? Will his journey propel him further in the world of international economic policy? Or will he return home to resume his life in public service? In the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it's done. Nigel Clarke is proof of this. He was born with a talent for numbers, developed a discipline to invest in growing his talent, then worked hard to put his gift in service of his nation.
Thank you for the opportunity to serve. It's been the highlight of my life. It's been a privilege of unmatched scale to have had the opportunity to serve Jamaica in this position as Minister of Finance and the Public Service and as Ambassador of Economic Affairs. And of course, I'd have to thank Prime Minister Andrew Holness for that. The team at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service is outstanding, and they're not in the public eye, and so sometimes we can't even imagine the amount of work that they do. Shout out to all the people from Northwest St. Andrew and to my constituents. It's been that will be probably the hardest part, actually. The bonds that have formed, the human bonds, the personal bonds in the communities of Northwest St. Andrew. They know themselves, and those are bonds that will never ever go away.
Nigel Clarke may shudder at the comparisons when I say this, but I must. Like Usain Bolt and Bob Marley before him, Nigel Clarke has shown that beating the odds and achieving what others deem impossible is what we Jamaicans do best.